Okay, welcome to part 2 of the Adobe Creative Suite practice. We're going to continue using Photoshop, and we're going to practice a little bit what you learned last week, and we're going to add some new steps. Hopefully you'll find these interesting and useful. I'm giving you a picture to work with. It's called smilepon.jpg. Again, it's a picture of Ponta, of course. What else? And if you go into Photoshop, you'll be able to open it. So go to the File menu and click Open, and let's choose Smilepon, and then Open, and there we go. All right, so we're going to be trying several different things. We are going to be selecting with various tools, but especially the marquees. We're also going to be using a new tool called the Quick Selection tool. And then we're going to be doing a couple other things which will be very interesting, and that is playing around with layers and with styles. So you might want to make sure that you can see the Styles tab, and you should see little buttons that look like this, and then down here you'll see Layers. So if you're able to select Layers and Styles, that will help you prepare. So let's begin by choosing the marquee button. Remember, the marquee button is right over here. You have the elliptical marquee and the rectangular marquee. So make sure you've chosen the rectangular marquee tool. You'll notice that once you do that, in the toolbar above, there will be several controls, but a key point will be something called feather. The feather should be set to 0 pixels. If it's not set at 0 pixels, you should select that, type the number 0, and hit Enter. And that should set the feather at 0 pixels. We're going to be choosing a different feathering a little later on. So once you've got that, just use that selection tool to select Ponta's face. Something just like this. Don't select too much more. Select just about this much. Now, we want to copy this into the clipboard. If you right-click to copy, it won't work so well. What you should do is go up into the Edit menu and then copy from here. That's much easier. Now, we're going to make a new document, and we're going to put what we just copied into the new document. So in order to do that, we should go up to the File menu and say New. Now when you do this, you have to fill in the details about the document. You might have width and height similar to what I have. This is the width and the height of what we just copied. But I would like our whole image to be bigger than that. So let's set the width to 1000 pixels, and then let's set the height to 1400 pixels. So this will be a little bit tall, like a portrait. Click OK, and now we have a new document. You can see it's taller than the other one. You'll also notice at the top left side, we have 2 tabs. You should be seeing these. On the left it says Smilepon, and on the right it says Untitled. So if you click on Smilepon, that's our original picture. If you click on Untitled, then that is the new blank picture. So now we're going to paste what we copied before. Go to the Edit menu, select Paste, and there's Ponta's head right there. Okay, so you'll notice a few things. First of all, you'll notice on the right-hand side, we now have 2 layers. We started with the background, but now we pasted the picture of Ponta's head. So originally it was just the background, but whenever you paste something, it comes out as a new layer. You'll also notice just to the left of each one, there's a little eyeball. If you click on the eyeball, you will make that layer invisible. So if I click on the eyeball next to layer 1, what we just pasted will not appear, but it's still there. All you have to do is click on the eyeball again and it will appear. Click it off, and it won't appear. So I'd like you to leave it like this. Just remember that we pasted this picture. Remember that the edges are very sharp. but make sure that right now layer 1 is hidden. Okay, now we're going to go back to the original picture. We're going to unselect what we selected before. There's a couple ways to unselect. One way is just to click on a location outside of the square. If I click here, then we lose the selection. Another way to do it is to deselect. If you hold down the Control key on the keyboard and type the letter D, Control D, it will also, well, it didn't do it very successfully, left a little line there, but it did deselect. Now we want to change the marquee. Instead of the rectangular marquee, we want to change this to the elliptical marquee. So go ahead and switch to the elliptical marquee. Except this time, we're going to put in a much bigger feather. So just select everything in the feather box up here, and let's type 30. Hit Enter, and now the feather is set to 30 pixels. Now we won't see what this really looks like for another moment until we copy and paste it. So let's make a selection again of Ponte's head. So I'm going to start, don't start too close to the top, start maybe around just above his ear, and then make a circle around where his head is. If you don't like where the circle is pointing, then you can move it up or move it down, but I think this is about right. Now once again, you want to copy it, so go to Edit and Copy. You could also do Control-C. And now let's go back to the new image, the untitled image that we made, and now paste again. Notice that this time, not only is it a circular cutout, but notice the edges. This is what feathering is. The more feathering you have, the more blurry the edges are. So that's kind of a nice effect to have that kind of feathering. You'll see over on the right-hand side that layer 1 with the square edges, that's now not visible. And now we've just added layer 2, and I would like you to make that invisible as well. So click on the eyeball, so once again it looks blank. We still have these two layers, but you made layer 1 and layer 2 invisible. And again, we're going to go back to the original image. Again, unselect the selection that you made before, and now we're going to choose a different selection tool. Now we're going to choose what's called the Quick Selection tool. Now if you click down, there's two different choices here, the Magic Wand or the Quick Selection tool. The Magic Wand is not very good in this case. The Magic Wand allows you to select by color, and it's not very easy to get everything that you want. A much better tool is the Quick Selection tool. Now again, as with any tool, when you click on this, you'll find various settings up here. Excuse me. There are a couple settings that I want you to make sure about. The first is that of these three buttons, you have chosen the plus button. Now, the plus button means that when you click more than once, you are adding to the selection. If you don't have this, or if you have it set to something else, then the second time you try to select something, it will take away from what you'd selected before. This means you're adding the selection. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. Next, I want you to set the size of the brush. The size of the brush can be varied. You'll notice that if I set it to 140, then it's a really, really big circle. That's a little bit too big. So let's go back and let's set this to just 40 pixels. You can either slide it over there, or you can just type it in here, type 40, and hit Enter. And now it should be set to 40, and this plus button should be selected. Now this tool allows you to select areas just by painting on them. So I'm going to start at the tip of his ear, and all I do is click and then drag down. So if you keep on going, you can select more and more and more. This is how much I want you to select. I don't want you to select more than this. Only select his head down to his collar. If you accidentally select too much, then you can do Control D and Now nothing is selected, and you can start again. Notice that you can click several times. I can click once, and then click again, and click again, and you can keep on clicking one bit at a time until you've totally selected the area that you want. This is possible because we have this plus button selected. If we click minus, it would take away from what we selected before. But if you click plus, then it will add to what we selected before. So I'm going to do this one more time. I have the plus button selected. It's 40 pixels of brush, and now I'm just going to click and drag until I have Ponta's head, and there we go. That's fairly easy. Now there's a problem. Right now the selection is very rough and sharp. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I copy, and please don't do this part, just watch me do it, but don't do this because this is not good. If I copy and then I paste, you'll notice that the edges are really rough and they don't look very good at all. So we want to avoid that. How do we avoid that? Well, after you make the selection with the Quick Select tool, there's a button up in the toolbar at the top called Refine Edge. That's what we want to use. So click on Refine Edge. Here we get a dialog box that shows us many options. This will help us smooth out our selection. So what I'd like to do is to choose, to choose a feather of 4 pixels. You'll notice that the selection looks a little bit better now. And then I'm going to choose Shift Edge, and I'm going to type -40. That takes away a little from the outside of the selection. So this looks a lot better. So when you've done those two, Feather 4 and Shift Edge -40, you can go down here and click OK. Now go to Edit and Copy, or Control-C. Click on the New Document, and then Paste. You'll see it's still a little bit rough, but you'll notice that in most of this, it's much softer and much cleaner. It's not very good around his neck, but we're going to fix that in just a moment. So how are we going to fix that? Well, we're going to fix it with another tool that you learned about last week, and that's the lasso tool. Here, we want to again set the feather. Let's set that to 5 pixels right now. So just select this number, type 5, and hit Enter. So now you should have the lasso tool. Not the polygonal or the magnetic, but just the plain lasso tool. It should be set to 5 pixels feather. And what we're going to do is we are going to select his neck to make it smoother. So I'm going to start up here, and I'm going to just click and drag and make kind of just a curved, that's not very clean, but that should be good enough, a curved space there, and then select below it. So now it doesn't matter where you select down here. What matters is that you made a curve down here and you selected the bottom of his neck. Now if you don't like the way that curve looks, just do Control-D or click outside, and then you can try again. And maybe the second time you try it's going to be a little bit smoother. Let's try that. That's a little bit better. Once you've got it the way you like it, then all you need to do is hit the backspace key. And now you'll see it took away that part of his neck. If you now click in a blank area outside, now you can see that the selection looks a lot better. Now if you'd like to move Ponta's head down a little bit, notice that we're looking at layer 3, and layer 3 is basically blank, it just has Ponta's head there. So to move it down, in the tools you can choose this tool. This is the Move tool. And now if you just click and drag Ponta's head, you can move it anywhere you want. I'm going to move mine down a little bit because we're going to be doing a few other things in this document. All right. The next step, I'd like to make an interesting background. Now there's a lot of different ways to do this. You can go on the internet and you can find some backgrounds and you can copy and paste them into here. But I'd like to show you how to use styles. If styles does not appear in your palettes on the right, you can find it by going to the window menu, and wherever you can find it down here, you'll find styles. This is alphabetical order. So go to styles. If it's checked, that means it's already opened. If you select it now, it'll disappear. But if it's not selected, select it. And then when you look around somewhere, you should see the styles palette. Okay, now I want to make the background have a style. You'll notice that if I click on the background in the layers palette, and then if I click on a style, nothing happens. That's because you cannot change the background in that way. What you have to do is you have to select, copy, and paste the background. There's an easy way to do this with keyboard shortcuts. You can do Control-A, Control-C, and Control-V. You'll notice if you look closely that you just created a new blank layer, and it's filled in with white. Now I'm going to undo that. Whoops, so there we go. And so you can see a different way of doing this. If you want to use the menus, if the keyboard shortcuts are not good for you, then you can go to Edit, and then you can, whoops, I'm sorry, not Edit, my mistake, Select. Go to Select and choose Select All. Now it's selected everything. Go to Edit and choose Copy, and then go to Edit again and choose Paste. So basically select all, copy, and paste. That'll make a new layer called Layer 4. That's what you want to use. Now, when we had the background, if you click on the background, clicking on these styles doesn't do anything. But if you have a layer, like Layer 4, which is not the background, it's not locked, you can click on the layers and you'll notice that suddenly you get some really interesting effects in the photograph. You can see that every one of these layers has a different has a different effect and brings a different background to the image. There's a lot of these here, and I'm going to choose the yellow one right here. This is called Sunspots, and that gives me, I think, a very nice color for punta. So that's a way to make a background if you'd like it to be like that. Like I said, there's other ways to give it a background, but this is a very quick and easy way to do it. You'll notice that when we chose a style for that layer, it shows you the style effects down here. I'll explain those a little bit more later on. If you don't want to see these, you can click on a little arrow on the side and they will be collapsed. So you can show them or hide them. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to create some text. So I'm going to go over to the left side and I'm going to select the text tool. There's several different choices again, but you want to get the one at the top, the horizontal type tool. Notice my cursor changes. I've got an I-beam cursor. And now you can just make a text box along the top. Now, it might be that your blinking cursor for text is really, really small. Let's type punta with an exclamation point. Now, on my computer, this is looking really, really tiny. But we can fix that. Now, if you just try to change the font and font size now, nothing's going to happen. You have to select the layer. So go over to the layers down here, and even if it's selected right now, you want to click on Layer 5. When you do that, the dotted outline will disappear, but that's fine. So if we click on Layer 5, the dotted outline disappears, but now we've selected this text layer. So now we can change it. If you go up to the top, you'll see a toolbar for text. You can change the font from Arial to anything else you want. You can try various fonts. It might work better if you make the font size bigger. Even 72 point is not going to be very big. I believe 130 point will be a little bit more manageable. Personally, I like the font called Goudy Stout. So if you type Goudy space S and then hit Enter, you should get Gaudy Stout. You can choose a different font if you want to. You can adjust the size as you want it. But I want something that looks like this. So we've got Ponta here. Now I would like to give it a style again. Except I don't want to use any of these styles. I'd like to create my own style. How do you do that? Well, you'll notice over here that when we applied the styles before, a little FX came up on the right-hand side. Where we have the text, it says Ponta, there's no FX over here. But if I double-click in this blank area, if I go click, click, you'll notice that I get a layer style dialog box. And that allows me to make a lot of changes. So once again, where you have the text layer and it says Ponta, double click right in this area over here. Click, click, and you should get the layer style dialog box. Now, there's a lot of different effects that you can do. For example, I can choose bevel and emboss, and you'll notice that Ponta became kind of 3D. There's a lot of options here. For example, and now in order to see this, you notice I'm not looking at the bevel and emboss. In order to see this, you have to actually click in the bevel and emboss box, not the blending options, but the bevel and emboss part in the sidebar. Notice that I can change the depth, and when you change the depth, it seems to get more contrasted in the actual image. I'm going to choose a depth of about 250, 240, whatever. Anything between 200, 250 should be okay. Size can also be changed. The more you make the size, the more you'll see there's kind of a 3D effect. I'm going to make my size 10. I think that's a nice size right there. I can click on Contour, and that'll give me a little bit more 3D style there. And I'm going to click on Texture also. You'll notice that texture gives it kind of a texturized feel. If you want to change the texture, you can click on this pattern right here, and you can choose from several different textures that are in the program. You can also load other textures if you want. I like the texture at the far right. So right now, let's just use that one. Stroke will put an outline around your text. So I'm going to click Stroke. And now we have an outline. It's a little too strong. If I go into the stroke area, if I click on this bar, I can change the size so that the outline is thicker or thinner. 1 is too thin, 2 is okay, but I think 3 looks best. It's too dark though, so I'm going to change the opacity or the visibility down to about 50%. That makes it half transparent. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to jump down to a gradient overlay. A gradient overlay means that it's going to put a different set of colors on top of the letters. It'll make the other effects disappear for a moment, but don't worry. If you click Gradient Overlay, now you'll see that the yellow is gone, and we've got a black and white gradient. Now, if you've clicked on the Gradient Overlay bar here, you should be able to see several controls. One of them, where it says Gradient, allows you to choose between several different gradients. I'm going to choose, for example, this one right here. It's called Copper. And you can see I've got a nicer looking gradient. So that's nice. I can use that. And I think the effect is actually pretty good. You can change the opacity to something a little bit less or a little bit more, depending on how much of the color you want to come through. And I'm going to do, let's see, one more. I'm going to do a drop shadow. This will create a shadow below the words, and it'll make it look like it's hovering over the picture. Notice that the drop shadow doesn't really appear to do very much, but if you click on the drop shadow bar and you change the distance, I'm going to make my distance about, let's say, 12 pixels. But more importantly, change the size. I'm going to change the size to about maybe 18 pixels. And you can see that the shadow actually has a pretty strong effect. And that's about all I'm going to do. There's more things if you want to play around with the inner shadow, inner glow, satin, color overlay, outer glow. You can just play around with these as much as you like. Play with these different controls. but I want you to do something that looks like what I did in the assignment that you hand in. Again, you can choose the Move tool, and so long as you've selected the text layer, you can move the text to wherever you want it, and that is the final appearance. That's what you're going to be giving to me. So now all you've got to do is save. Last time we saved as a JPEG. However, this image has many layers, and we want to keep those layers. That means we have to save as a Photoshop document. This is going to be a big document. It's going to be many megabytes. So what we do is that we go to the File menu, and we want to say Save. Now this is right now an untitled document. An untitled document. If it has a title, if it's already been saved, then this will work differently. So if it's already titled, if you've already saved it, then you want to do Save As. But right now it should be untitled, so just do Save. You can do Save As right now too. That'll work as well. You will get the Save dialog box. You'll notice that automatically it's set to Photoshop. That's because Photoshop can see that you have a multi-layer image and you need to save it as a PSD. You'll notice at the end it says .psd. If it doesn't say that, then don't worry about it. But if it does say that, then select everything up to that, and let's save this as week 2.psd. Week 2.psd. Probably to make it more clear, why don't you put your name at the beginning? In my case, it would be Luis, week2.psd. Go ahead and save it. And now it should appear wherever you saved it. In my case, it's saved on the desktop, so I have it right here. Take that and put it into the graphics practice, the Adobe Photoshop graphics practice folder in the public folder. And that's your assignment for week 2. I'll try to give a list of instructions, but the list I make will be very, very basic. It won't be very, very detailed, but it'll have kind of like a list of notes as to what you're going to do. So please watch the video while you are doing your work. So have Photoshop open and then have a browser open watching the video. Watch the video to tell you what to do, pause it, and then go to Photoshop and do what I told you to do. And that should give you something like this. So good luck on your week number 2 project.